Well, we do appreciate the invitation to come and talk to you about our program. Anytime that Chris or one of our faculty can get out and promote what we do for our students at Fort Hays State University, we relish that opportunity. In case you don't know where Fort Hays is, we are in Hays, Kansas. We're in western Kansas. If you threw a dart and ended up somewhere halfway between Kansas City and Denver, you'd hit Hays, Kansas. We're right on I-70. Our university has about 5,000 on-campus students. We have about 7,000 that are virtual college students, and about 3,500 that are international students. So we have grown from about 4,000 students when I started 22 years ago to the 15,000 students. We've had to be creative in the ways that we got students to campus or virtually in order to survive and actually thrive in what we're doing. In the department specifically, in 2012, we had a tragic accident where our department chair, been there for 39 years, was killed in a car accident. And I don't know whether I showed up earliest the next morning or what, but I was faced with, you're in charge and let's move forward. And from that time, we had the opportunity to hire Chris and several other faculty members. We had 117 students in the fall of 2012. Our administration, I really believe at that time, was on a thought process, are these guys even going to survive? Fast forward to this fall, and we have 201 students in our department. We added a construction management emphasis in the fall of 2012. We had construction technology. It's more down the lines of creating a situation for somebody in cabinetry, millwork, and those types of things, but not really a true construction management program. And so we had done a little research. Chris was part of that. What type of classes do we need? What was our advisory board telling us with the type of classes? And ultimately, our program of study blends a little bit of the traditional hands-on things that we were used to with theory-based business classes that would essentially take our students to the point that they could be prepared to get out in the industry and be construction managers. We're really proud of the fact that we had went from 120 students up to 200, and we're even looking into the future. Construction management specifically, we started with 2 kids in the fall of 2012. We have 69 kids in that program right now. We have 7 faculty. Every one of us are teaching an overload this semester. We have been working through our administration to say, hey, we need another faculty member, and we're hoping that with everybody having overloads that will happen. But the flip side of that is Chris and I have to leave, and we got to go back and teach tomorrow because we're teaching overloads, situation. So it's been a fantastic situation for us. The other thing that has happened in about 2012, we realized that we needed to be accredited by some type of outside agency. We looked at several, and the one that made the most sense for us was ASPE, the Association of Technology, Management, and Applied Engineering. That particular program aligned with some of the design aspects that we were doing, some of the management aspects that we were doing, and specifically helped us with creating learner outcomes that essentially built rubrics, and we've identified then curriculum mapping all the way through our program. We will, 2 years ago, we went through the process and was awarded the accreditation. In the fall of 19, we have a follow-up, and I think that the follow-up will render that we will have a 6-year time frame that we will then start doing the recurring assessment process. But it has elevated our expectations. It has shown every student what our expectations are and how to meet those expectations. It's been a good process for our program. All right, Chris.
And we're in the building.
Oh, I should talk about that. Yeah. Chris and I just realized that on our slides, we didn't put a lot of pictures. We just like to stand up and talk, but we moved in. This is our second year in the Center for Applied Technology. On the campus of Fort Hays State University, we have a mission to have all of our buildings new or remodeled. And we are to the point when the new art building that's being built right now is completed. All of our buildings on campus, we would have met that. The infrastructure at Fort Hays is unbelievable, but this building specifically has 58,000 square feet. It was a $14 million build, another couple of $1 million for all the equipment that we have in there. So when we moved from Davis Hall, which is across the street, we brought very few pieces of equipment with us. And we have in that building a typical woodworking lab. We have a manufacturing metals lab. We have a welding lab. We have finish rooms. Chris has his own construction management room. We have robotics, hydraulics, pneumatics. We have plastics, engineering design technology. We have several of those types of labs. The one thing that we did build into this building was places for our students to hang out. We had 14 major design changes. Our facilities planning guy finally told us, you guys got to look at the plan, you keep changing them. But we kept generating ideas that made the building better for our students. One of those ideas was places for our students to hang out. So hallways got widened out, and now we have places that people from across campus will go get their lunch in the Union and walk across to our building to eat lunch. A fantastic place for our students and our faculty. I think Davis Hall is now a distant memory. We were in it for about 59 years. So.
Okay. One shameless plug, the AGC of Kansas Board of Directors has decided we're going to have our first ever Board of Directors meeting at Fort Hays this fall. They didn't add it to the rotation of our annual, one of our 4 meetings where we rotate between Kansas State, Pittsburgh State, and now Fort Hays. So our board can see firsthand what's going on in terms of practical labs and other programming within construction programming at Fort Hays.
Very excited about that.
I'm not the traditional, I get in trouble all the time for not being a traditional instructor. So I came into education later on in life. I had spent most of my life being an entrepreneur, buying buildings, coming up with a business idea, building the business idea, building the business, get it running, get water running, and then I'd sell it. And I just kept doing that. I've also have a passion for doing restoration work on pre-1950 homes. Love the 1910, 1880 houses. And so I came into, when the department chair, Dr. Rita, was killed, Kim was moved up, he called me and asked me if I'd consider teaching for a year, and I stepped in, helped out, haven't looked back. One of the things that I really do and I believe in is, in order to teach students, we have to engage them, and engage them way beyond the book. I can keep their attention span for about 15 minutes, and then their cell phones and everything else, social media becomes a part that distracts. Kind of the way this whole community partner engagement started working in the Hays for us, between Fort Hays and Hays, was I did home inspections. I've done them for probably about 15 years. And I got a call from the local 4-H club, and their 4-H building out at the fairgrounds, was in pretty rough shape. Would you consider coming out and doing a survey of our building? I said, no, actually I won't, but I would bring 20 students with me, and I'll let them do the survey of your building. So I took my students out there, hands-on. I'm just a believer in, we can talk about it for so long, but let's go do it. And so we went out there, and I took them through the things they'll look at, whether it's electrical, heating, air, roof structure, the foundation, and then I had them all write reports for me on what they saw were the positives and negatives. Brought in the 4-H board to the university, and my students gave a presentation on whether it was worth rebuilding or should it be torn down and rebuilt. And by far, my students came up with solid reasons why it needed to be torn down and rebuilt. Well, how do you tear down? Yeah, 4-H, we have no money. And I thought, well, maybe we can create a partnership in this idea. And I'll actually let you go to the next slide. And because I think this kind of says it all. Partnerships always sound a lot better than they really are. And I'll let Kim kind of talk about it. When I came in and said, hey, I want to do this, I got grand ideas, and sometimes I'm always kind of corralled in and brought back to reality with Mr. Stewart.
Yeah, I got to run the reins a little bit sometimes with Chris, but I like the idea of partnerships. One of the things, though, as the administrator and as we were working through assessments and learner outcomes, my question to Chris at that time was, okay, this sounds like a pretty good idea, but these are our learner outcomes, and are we gonna chuck those out? We're gonna get away from all the lessons that we teach, and we're just gonna become a labor pool for community projects. That was my concern as the administrator. And I think what has happened between the two of us, we've come to a general consensus that we still need those learner outcomes. We still need to use our rubrics to identify how can we put kids in those positions and still complete those assignments. And some of those could be based off of a skill development. But how do we assess them? Because that was our bottom line, was we're trying to assess where these students would be when they start the class to the end of class. What are we going to do? And so as an administrator, that's something that I have to take into account as we look at these projects. How do they affect our assessment? How do they affect ultimately our accreditation? And really, are those students getting out of the class what we need for them to get out of in relationship to the knowledge and even the skill set that they might be trying to get to?
And along with that, so we always burst my bubble and makes me go back and makes me prove why we want to do these different things, which is a good thing because it made me step back and think about how exactly do we not become just a labor force for a project in the community. And the 4-H building was a good practice project for us to the project we'll show you here that we did last year. The 4-H didn't have any money. They were struggling to raise money. I wasn't really, we had just started a planning and design class, so I was trying to fish my way through that. At that time, we did not have we had a building construction class for 20 years, but we did not have a concrete class. And so there were some challenges in there to get that. If we tear all of that out of there, how are we going to get the concrete, the foundation all put back in so we can put the structure up, which led me to start thinking and going back in and saying, why don't we have a concrete class? Like, if we're going to be doing this, we should be pouring, we should be digging the footings, we should be putting down the rebar, we should be pouring the concrete, and then the following semester we build. Like, that's a complete project. We actually did succeed in that project. It was a grand learning experience, not only for me, but it changed the dynamic of our construction class completely. Prior to that, we'd been mostly building garages and backyards. The concrete, the slab was always already there, so it was a one-semester class. Typically, a lot of those projects you just drew and planned out yourself. The site plans, all that kind of stuff was done. So it made me really step back and think about why isn't my planning and design class sitting down, planning and designing multiple projects across the community. Number one, they can't be pretend. I did not want them to be, well, here's a house in town that has a big empty backyard, and then we go through the process and we plan out a pretend shop space or an addition on this house. The beginning of the semester, what I do is I take them through that process. And then what I did is I started putting the word out in the community. I'm looking for 5 to 10 real projects that you can become a client to my class. And what I want you to do is I want you to just basically send me an email or send me a message, name, number, and basically what you want. That's it. Just keep it very brief. When we reach a certain point, actually, you can put the next slide. When we reach a certain point in the semester, I would take those requests from clients or people in town, and I would split up my class. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I wanted to break up the friends. Okay, it's the first thing I wanted to do. The other thing I didn't want to do is well, you're really good at CAD, you're really good at this, and I didn't want to start partnering. I wanted to create groups that had really good CAD people, but no designers, and I wanted it to be an intermix of people. Something that we really have an advantage of in our program that in the beginning I didn't know how it was going to work out, but we've had an influx of interior design students from the interior design area. They weren't doing a lot of construction. As a matter of fact, they had no construction classes in their curriculum. A lot of their electives started becoming some of our construction graphics, planning and design classes. I started getting this influx of interior design students coming in, so I had this really cool mix of students.
The thing that has happened, though, it led us to certificate programs.
Oh, yeah.
So
Steve's always thinking of the administrative side.
Numbers of the seats, right? Well, if we had 4 or 5 seats that weren't filled in CAD, how can we fill these seats? So we started certificate programs for kids in interior design or kids in business, that they could come to our department and take 4 classes, specific classes, and then we would give them a certificate. And that is, I was just telling Mike, I was trying to add a student to a class. The young lady wanted to get into a class, and I flipped open our schedule for this fall semester. We have nowhere, not one class, not one spot for somebody in an entry-level class this spring. And I was like, oh my gosh. I didn't realize we're jam-packed. But if you walk around our classrooms, we're jam-packed. Okay? Another thing I want to piggyback on Chris with what he's done in this particular planning and design class. It has now become more than just planning a structure. We've involved the city, and Chris brings every type of municipal, from inspections to the city manager in, and our students actually know how you can go from a cattle pasture to a city block to building a house. And those things have changed our thought process as well, what our students need to know by the time they get out of our program and study. And that just came from what we were doing with different projects and the things that we were needing to know before we started those projects. And we found out, we were finding out those pieces of information, and we just let the students, hey, here it is. But then we were like, well, why are we finding that? Let's let them go find that information. So we bring in people, and then they have to go talk to those people. And the client interaction has been a tremendous asset for those particular teams that are taking place.
Yeah, and as those teams go out and sit down and I remember the first time I sent them out to go talk to a client. A couple of the clients sent me a message or text me, and they were like, I don't know if your students were prepared to come talk to me. And I'm like, what do you mean? Well, they didn't know what questions to ask. Well, that's probably because I didn't sit them down and tell them and train them the questions to ask. And so we took a step back. What kind of questions are you wanting to ask your client? Well, number one, okay, what's your project? Well, wait a minute. Before we even go do that, you need to look the address up on the Ellis County GIS. What is it zoned? What's the lot size? What are the setbacks? Where's the infrastructure? Is water coming in the front or the back? Where's the Where's the sewer? I want you to be able to answer those questions when your client asks you those questions. Wait a minute, what's the style of the house? If they say they want this kind of addition put on, is that going to match? You need to have the understanding, is it a Craftsman? When was it built? What's the siding? What kind of roof does it have on it? You want this picture roof? Well, wait a minute, that's not gonna work, because if we put this large of an addition, that roof's gonna be above. I needed those students to see that, because so many, as you know, when you go out and talk to clients, they can't see it. They have an idea of what they want, but they can't see it. Through that process, and starting that class, then starting the concrete class, last year, it'd be 2 years ago now, I was called and asked by a couple of community people. They were like, hey, we'd like to take you out at lunch, and that typically means somebody wants something. And I'm like, hey, I'll go and listen. And they had a need, and they were looking at the downtown open air pavilion. The project had been bid out a couple different times, came back in the $700,000 to $800,000 range. They just didn't have the money to pull it off, so they needed it. The city wasn't willing to kick forward with any funds. They had to go through private donation. They needed bathrooms in the vicinity. Finding the best suited place to build downtown. The only place that really was down there was railroad land, and I don't know if anybody's ever dealt with the railroad, but it's easier to rent land from God, I think, than to lease land. And then how are we going to create a successful partnership? The 4-H project went pretty well. It had a
How
few
big was that project?
dollars.
No, just size-wise.
Oh, size-wise, it was like a garage on steroids, probably 30 by 40. Had a little lean-to covered area hung out over the end. I mean, it really was in line with a lot of the projects we've kind of been doing.
Yeah. Now, Chris, tell them when you walked into my office about this project. What was
I
that?
said, hey, I want to go downtown and partner with the Downtown Business Development Corporation. I want to build a $500,000 open air pavilion. It's 64 by 84. The concrete pour is going to be about 94 yards. Probably have 14 students that day in that class. None of them have concrete experience. What do you think of this idea? And of course he's like, you're crazy. I'm like, well, that's why I'm going to pursue it.
I tried to be a little bit more diplomatic. I tried to tell him it was just a little bit out of our scope.
Yeah.
But the thing it did do was start us thinking, our kids need projects like this.
Yeah.
They need to be in some commercial, red iron, type of structures that would put them in a position to have the knowledge that they need to move on, to commercial type applications. This job did get the big brakes on it when we just told them it was out of our scope. There was no way that we could possibly build a building that big.
What was cool was we did have a problem. We had a problem from every direction. They didn't have quite enough money. It was out of our league, but why stop there? So what I did is like I did the 4-H. We're going to meet downtown at this railroad land. That is not leased, by the way. We have no lease on it. The city has no lease on it yet. We're going to design a project that's set here. By the way, here's the old plans they had. We can't build this because it's too expensive, but we need to build something similar. I tell you what, I get the privilege every day to walk into a classroom with 20, sometimes 30 students. And if you bring ideas down here, that's where they are. If you bring in ideas up here, I'm telling you, they will move there. You just got to step out of their way. Like Mr. Stewart always says about me, he puts a handle on the back of my belt just to hold me in between the ditches. That is what I have learned to do with my students. I didn't know how we were going to get there. I wasn't going to tell my students that we couldn't get there, but I started telling them to start dreaming. And they started designing this structure. Downtown, by the railroad. What does a railroad roof look like? Is it going to be a double pitch? What is it going to look like? Open air. How are we going to support that structure so it doesn't start wobbling in the wind? How are you going to find those answers? Because you can't come to me with them because I don't have the answers. You need to find a structural engineer somewhere. So my students literally got on the phone started Googling structural engineers in the state of Kansas, and they started calling them. Who will help us design this project? We ended up finding a gentleman out of Salina that was willing to at least take a look at what we were doing. And I'm telling you, we sent him the crudest drawings. Just, are we even on the right direction? How are we going to hold this thing down? Do we bury the posts in the ground? Is it a monolithic? We did not know where we were headed. But it was the give and take of the students with the structural engineer, bringing back the problems to the classroom, knowing where it was going to go. I was not about to tell him that. He was telling me there was just probably no way we could pull this off. That's the direction we headed down. Keep going. What made it real again was the fact that my students took these ideas and I gave them a deadline. You like deadlines. I know you like deadlines. And I gave them a deadline, and the deadline is on this date, we are going to the city commission, and you're going to give a presentation on your findings. Estimate a schedule of time to do it, how we would pull it off as a class, how it's going to be built, what it's going to look like. It made it real. And I'm telling you, the hardest thing to do in education is to make these projects real. Theory out of a book, they stay engaged for a short amount of time, but it made it real. I made them get up there and I made them sweat, right? Made them get up there and make mistakes. I made them stumble. I made them look at the...
Every student in the class had to get up.
Every student had to get up and talk to the city council. And guess what? Going into it, the city council knew that we were in over our heads. But I said, I'm telling you, I don't care if you know we're in over our heads. You have to complete this for us. You have to let us take this step. Because if we never build it, I want them to feel that pressure. And that's when we felt the pressure. Click to the next slide. It came to a screeching halt. Because in all reality, it was over our head. I can't be the licensed contractor on it. The liability between Fort Hays. What if we build it and there's 150 people under there and a windstorm comes through and it collapses? Which way do we take this? You put the brakes on.
Yeah, we put the brakes on. There was no way. I mean, just the physical nature of the entire job. We didn't have the equipment to do something like that.
Yeah.
It was just out of our scope. And the two ladies downtown just kept on, you know, Fort Hays is going to do this. And we knew it was out of our scope.
They bypassed me and went to him. They bypassed him, went to the dean. They bypassed the dean and they went to the president. Listen, we've got to build this
Yeah, the
project.
president called us in and said, can't we do this project? Let's see, we'll need this, we'll need this, we'll need this.
Yeah.
Oh, we can't do that project.
So what was really cool in the end, what came out of it is exactly what needed to come out of it. And it was a local contractor, Commercial Builders out of Hays, agreed to step up and be the general contractor. We sat down with them through several meetings and we started to discuss exactly how we're going to do this. Now you understand, my class meets Tuesday, Thursday afternoons, 1 to 4:30. How are you going to set aside the labor to help get this done? When are we going to work on it? Because we can only work on it Tuesdays and Thursdays. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I'm going to have 10 students or 20 students. And oh, by the way, we only can start out at this day and we need to end on this day of a semester. So how are we going to pull this off? Commercial Builders was brave enough, if you click to the next slide, to step up, create a partnership. And people may say, well, what about the liability of having students down there doing the work? Commercial Builders did some research and it was now you remember the insurance?
Volunteer,
Yeah, so they had what they did was they got a volunteer labor addendum done to their insurance. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we started, they selected, this was the other thing I think they did right, was they selected the right superintendent. Calm, a good teacher, but demanding. And he and I sat down, I said, listen, I want you to treat this just like a job site. Hard hats, safety vests, listen, we have to follow this to a T. It's a public, we're in a very visible spot. We just need to follow this to the T. What was really pretty cool is I don't think he realized how much work, that first semester I had 18 students, I don't think he realized how much work 18 students can do in 3.5 hours.
And I want to echo on that because I think at first Gary Weatherby, the owner of Commercial Builders, I think he really anticipated that he would have a crew that would work, you know, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays or whatever we'd show up and
Help out.
Help out a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think what they realized very quickly was that if they organized on Mondays and Wednesdays, that when we got there, we would hit the ground running. Now, that also made Chris be organized to make sure that he had his team leaders in the right place, and that those people were actually coming to work.
Yeah. And so, speaking of team leaders, here's something else I do different. In my concrete class and in my building construction class, my job there at that is literally should be as a mentor. That's my job. That's how I look at it. So what I do is, before we get on a job site, however many students I have, I will split them up into groups, but I have a supervisor. So let's say you're my supervisor, this is my class coming today. You come 15 minutes early. You meet me there, we get the trailer unlocked. We discuss what the tasks are for today. As we go through those tasks, I'm asking you, do you know how to do this? Do you know how to do this? I know how to do that. No, I don't know how to do that. I've never done that before. And my response is always to that student, you better find somebody that can. So you need to find the skilled person in your group, because we have a lot of students that have a lot of different skills because they're out working for contractors. You need to figure that out before you get started. Now, the other thing you need to do is you need to select a safety person. Okay? So, and remember that there's a chain of command, and my students know that. And so that is when I take a step back and I let my supervisor bring them all in. I also let him corral the people that show up 5 minutes late. Why are you late? Wear your safety glasses. And I step back primarily in a role of just, I let her go to a point that they can't handle it anymore, and then I'll step in. But I let them take that supervisory role. And the reason why I want them to be in that supervisory role is because it's practice for them. It's an opportunity for them to step in and to see if they can be in charge. Do they feel comfortable enough to talk to students about their peers, about how to do something, how to pull, this is where we start, with the tape measure on the ground. If we're going to lay this building out, that's where we got to start at. And so, are you comfortable leading that process? Are you comfortable getting our rectangles set out? Are you comfortable with marking out where we need to? Are you comfortable with the set of plans? Are you comfortable with this? That's the process I go through every class period. We switch and rotate up so that student has that opportunity.
Teaming up with Commercial Builders allowed our students to take advantage of Gary's generosity, number one, being able to do that. But number two, the equipment that he had. And so, they were able to get the equipment that we needed. And as time went on, our students just did more and more and more and more work until essentially they completed that entire job with one superintendent from Commercial Builders.
Yeah. What was cool is that he would bring them together every time before we started. So we had our supervisor, he'd bring them together, he'd talk about what we're going to do for the day. It always humored me how he would just be like, okay, we're going to do these things, and then in hour and 45 minutes in, we're like, now we're going to start. Like, dude, you need to have a lot of work lined up for us, because 18 students can get a lot done if they're organized and working well. Some of the things that we got to do that were an advantage for us that was we got to bore 90, I think it's about 92 yards of concrete in one pour. Typical pour for us. This school year, what we're doing is building a pretty cool garage structure in the backyard for somebody. About 21 yards was the pour. I like to do big pours, give them a chance. I mean, 20 yards is not a big pour, but for them, this is a big pour. Set them up in a position. Here we got to do the large pour, bring in the pump trucks. The other thing we get to do is, just like he said, we got to bring in the bigger equipment and work off of utilizing the bigger equipment, the safety of using the bigger equipment, tying off on the roof, laying clay tops, setting the big trusses with the crane. Those are a lot of things that we got to do in this project. Stumble, absolutely. We ran into some things that didn't get planned, but I don't know, just things we had to work through, any construction site.
Now, tile roof goes are a lot easier than.
Yeah, we put the tile roof on at least 4 times. At least 4 times. None of us, including the guy from commercial, had done. I'm watching YouTube videos, like, how does this, like, it's gotta lay straight. And we just kept, we had struggles, but that's what you should have, and that's what I wanted the students to have. And I let the students go, and I let them make mistakes. What was interesting was this entire underside, we did a tongue and groove and a cantilever. It's a kind of a dome or a raised area on the inside. Having to fit all those corners and get those students to really appreciate, which wasn't that difficult, to get them to get everything to fit tight and to have that appreciation and the pride in their work. And I really was, what I noticed was, and what was really pretty cool, actually taught high school in Bonner Springs, and we built the 2 entrances into the football field. And while we were building this on my Facebook page, I remember one of my past students sent me a picture, and I told them while they were building that, someday you're gonna come back here with your child, and you're gonna be able to stand there, hold their hand, and point up and say, I helped build this in high school. And while we were building this, he posted on Facebook and tagged me, and he's like, got to do something cool today. And I had a picture, and he was standing there with his son in that pavilion, or that candle, or that roof we built. You know, I walked down to these guys and said, I'm telling you, someday you're gonna come back here, and you're gonna be proud that you got to participate in building this. And it made my job as a teacher, it was no longer the teacher and the student, it was us building that pavilion. It was watching students get on other students about, that gap's too much, take that off. That's not gonna look good. Don't bend that nail over. Wait a minute, you can't lay, I remember the first time we got ready to lay clay tile. We're all standing, it's freezing cold. Now I'm a little more cushy when it comes to the garage project in the backyard. If it's 20 degrees out and the wind's blowing, no, we don't have to work today. We have to get this done, and we have a lot of work to do. The garage projects, we can build them in a month if we want, so we have to stretch them out. Jeff Withington, the supervisor, like, dude, we're working. We have to work, we have to get this done. Because our labor, our students, they built this. It wasn't commercial builders helped guide it, we built it. To watch those students out there all bundled up, freezing, I'm like, hey, this is why you're getting a college degree.
I drove by the way.
Yeah, exactly. We were standing out there getting ready to do that roof, and those interior design girls I mentioned earlier in planning design, they're now enrolling in the construction class because they want to go out and get that experience. Jeff is like, all right, we're going to be my roof people today. First hands up for the 4 girls. We want to go up there. And it was cool to watch them step up, and I was like, boys, are you going to, like, what? They're like, oh, they can go up there, it's windy. I was like, all right, let them do it. But what was cool to, again, watch what happens in the classroom, the dynamic and the planning and the design part was those girls went up there and they were just picky. Like, you do, like, wait a minute, you can't do that. And I watched them argue and let them, I'd go up and watch a little bit, and I'd go down and I'd take the supervisor, like, you better go upstairs, check out what's going on up there, because they're having disagreements. But to create that real, you click the next one, create that real environment that you all have out there. I think it's important for us to try to emulate it as close as we can. That's actually the downtown pavilion finished. That was one of the first little gatherings they had down there. it's really a cool part of downtown Hayes now, I think. And one more thing, click to the next one. I think my next slide shows. Here's what happens. When we did the 4-H project, we do the pavilion, I got a call from the city manager because I involve the city manager, code enforcement in all my classes. I want them to come in there. I want them to talk to code enforcement. I want them to understand why we use code, how code works, to understand how to work with them. When you don't like what they have to say, how to figure out through the code book what you can do to come to an agreement on something. The city manager contacted me about 3 months ago. He said, hey, I'd like to visit with you about a project. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I want to take you to lunch again.
Yeah, I want to take me to lunch, free lunch once a semester. He said the Hayes Fire Department got a grant to build a fire training facility. Now, we are going to have this fire training tower put up, but we need a fire training classroom put up. Would you be interested in partnering in that? And I'm like, well, what do you envision this classroom is going to look like? Well, it's really just a garage on steroids. It's really all it is. And we started discussing it a little more, and I'm like, dude, I'm in. He's like, well, let me show you. I brought some drawings. I'm like, I don't want to see drawings. That's out. I don't want to see anything to do with that. What I need from you is who's the contact person when we're ready. And I will connect my students with that person. They become the client. Because I don't want to be I don't want to lead that project a direction that those students aren't going to take it. Because I want it to be student driven. And so because of our class sizes growing, we've actually had to condense a couple of our classes down into 8-week classes, which we were talking on the way here. Which one thing about having a course in 16 weeks, it's kind of like a comfort cruise. I don't know if you watch Seinfeld. He painted all the stripes in a big old comfort cruise. Took 2 lanes to turn them into 1 lane, and it's a comfort cruise in 16 weeks because you have a lot of time. What I love about the idea of the 8-week course is this: it's reality. Instead of getting 6 weeks to plan the fire station, they now have 3 weeks to plan the fire station. And what I mean by plan the fire station, it's not a sketch. It's a site plan with setbacks. Where's the sewer? Where's it going to enter? What's the project going to look like? What's the floor plan? What are the elevation drawings? What's the roof? What kind of trusses are we going to use? What's the elevation? Because I'm not going to tell them. It sets in floodplain. So we have to build the pad right out of floodplain. So they have 3 weeks to create that project with the zoning, get it through, to get that project through code enforcement, and make sure it's going to match everything that they're proposing. I don't know if you can tell, I kind of like that too. And the next one, I believe, is questions. Yeah. So that's kind of a wrap-up of how we've been tying our students into the community. Instead of just being slave labor, the reality is they can be labor at the exact same time. You all can create a great learning experience for a group of students. It does take patience on your side. It does take finding an instructor or a school that's willing to make that partnership work and to come together to create some of these projects. But I do think in the end, what ends up happening, because of your patience, students do take pride in that work, and then they'll take pride when they go out and do work for all of you.
Other partnerships that we have within our curriculum is 124 credit hours. We have 12 credit hours that are internship, where our students go out and work for you. And there's several people in this room that are taking on our internships. And interestingly enough, construction companies like to break that up. And so we'll go 3 credits on, after their freshman summer, sophomore summer, junior summer, or whatever. But we appreciate those opportunities for our students to get out and learn from your construction companies and you as mentors, because ultimately what we're trying to do is put out a product that you want to hire. And so
those mini internships are those after their freshman year, that internship you provide, or after that sophomore year, what it does is that student comes back to my classroom and all of a sudden, what I'm teaching is real. What we're talking about, they're doing. Or they're doing things and they're not afraid to speak up and say, hey, when I was out there on the garage we're doing right now, we have a couple of LVLs that hang out over this covered patio area. And I'm like, I'm not sure how we're going to tie those LVLs in the wall. Oh, hey, wait a minute. When I was out this summer, this is what we did. So why don't you create a drawing for us, to show us how to do that. But I believe
those partnerships have elevated our game in the
absolutely.
classroom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because those kids are coming back and letting us know, what's happening out there.
Yeah,
And that's been good for our program.
been very good. Questions, answers, thoughts?
What did you end up doing for the financing of the?
Once we went to the city saw the interest of the students. Once we found a partnership with commercial builders, there were several people that actually came together. We built that pavilion. It actually ended up being about a $270,000 project, but they have found all private funds, including the restroom facilities that we're putting down there, that we helped. We didn't build those, but we helped the design of where they would go and the site plan that we drew for. But
When commercial builders stepped up, that really helped.
it helped a lot.
Having that superintendent on the job site, using all of Gary's equipment, that was allowed us to be the labor force in that instance.
Yeah.
You said you got 69 enrolled right now?
That's correct.
How many of them are going to graduate this year?
I think we have probably 12 to 14 that are going to graduate in construction.
Do you guys do anything to help with job placement? Or is it just kind of on them, or?
Well, no, the internships have created a situation where they do a good job, they work themselves right into a job. I think we have, off the top of my head, I can think of 5 intent people, young men have signed intent to go to work, and so we have 100% job placement in our department right now. Now, if you look at our statistics, it says we have 95. But part of that is we'll get a farm kid that comes to our department, gets a degree in technology studies, and he goes back to the farm. Well, we don't get to count that as him using his degree for its intended purpose. So we end up, not being at 100%. But in the fall semester, we have a career day where we've invited construction companies, engineering firms, manufacturing companies to come in. 3 years ago, we started that for our department. Fort Hays had always done it as a big cloud for everybody, and we realized that we weren't getting companies connected to our students. And so that has grown now from 14 the first year to 31 or so last fall. Within 2 days after that, I think we had 14 companies that had called and said, hey, Wayne, what we invited. So we're really projecting that that's going to be a bigger event next year. And that's where we're really making a lot of these connections. And students are just working themselves into those jobs.
And it's so worth coming. And I'm not saying to promote it, but our career fair, it's real for our students. Come dressed up, have a good resume. And I'm talking freshmen. Be prepared. How do you shake hands? I line them up, get in line, shake my hand. No, get back on. Look me in the eye, shake my hand. I want to know you're here. I go through that with them because nobody's ever gone through that with them.
Those connections are really big.
Yeah, that face to
Yeah,
face.
we went to that, and it was great, definitely a good experience. I didn't know if you guys did anything else other than that, or if it was solely on the student to try and find something, or how you work with.
If I have a student that does not have a job, we reach out to companies that we know and just, and quite honestly, we have a pretty good nucleus of people that will email us and say, hey, put the word out. We're looking for this type of person.
And I have people that email me all the time, and I hang those on a job board or hang them in my classroom. Here's some opportunities that are out there.
Our planning placement office does a pretty nice job too. And interestingly enough, Our internship program, we've been doing it for probably 20 years or more. We now have somebody in our student affairs office now that is our internship person, based off of what we've been trying to do, and now Fort Hays is trying to get every student to have some type of an internship, situation. So, but we've been fortunate. Our people are getting jobs.
Yes.
So I'm curious how commercial constructors felt about the project at the end. Did they feel like it was something that they got value out of, what little profits they made, or did they like the way it went and that they want to do it again with it?
They didn't make any money. I can tell you that. They lost money.
But Gary Weatherby is a very community-oriented person.
He donated.
Has been involved in the downtown renovation projects throughout the years. So I think that once the project got stalled, I think he just felt compelled to step up, and he knew that there was a certain amount of money that was already dedicated to the project, and I just think as a community person, he wanted to see the project come to fruition.
So is he banging on your door to do another one, you think, or?
I think, oh yeah, absolutely. It was funny, Jeff Whittington, the superintendent that was on that site, they did like a $1.4 million renovation of an old gas station downtown, put an eye doctor in there and a dentist. And I stopped in there about a month ago to see how he's doing, and I said, how's it going? There were people everywhere. They were trying to get it done, they're on deadline. I go, well, what do you think? He goes, this is a cakewalk compared to working with 18 students. He's like, this is nothing. He goes, man, I'll tell you what, he goes, that taught me a lot about being prepared and just trying to handle, and the different skill levels. Some people have zero skills, but to manage those skills. And it's funny because he was doing, I told him, listen, split them up. You have good skills, you don't, let's pair them, let's start pairing people together. And that's how we kind of overcame some of those inconsistencies.
I had a little patience.
You do have to have patience. He only threw his hard hat, I think, twice. He warned them. He's like, listen, if I get mad, and he wasn't mad at the students, he was just mad at what was going on. Like, we just couldn't get something to work. And his hard hat sailed out. That's how it really is.
So you're going to get into masonry next?
Masonry is kind of like button and taping. I have no skills. I don't know that I could do that. It'd be cool. I wish we had somebody local in our area that could teach us some masonry stuff. I'll retract that. I can tell you one thing that we did get to be a part of. There was some masonry stuff on there, and I'd always take 2 students and have them go help and watch. I told anybody, I said, if you're standing around, you either be, you watch the masonry people, watch how they do the work, how they can do it. And the masonry people were very understanding to take the time to show us what was going on. Actually, the garage project we're working on, the same masonry guy was putting masonry in an addition on a farm credit union. And we heard all this hollering and hooting and hollering one day when we were forming and getting ready. And we looked down the alley, and it was pretty chilly out in there. Brick had started to come away. And he's like, come. So we all ran over there, we were grabbing boards and trying to help him get it back up for him. So we learned a lot that day. You gotta let that masonry cure before you go too high. But yeah, I wish we had somebody around that would teach us some of that stuff.
We would invite everybody to go to our website, check out our curriculum, check out our building, and if you are interested in coming to our career day, we invite you out to that next fall. We appreciate all the opportunities that we can to get our students in front of you. We like to have that perfect match. We want that right kid that fits with your company, so that eventually we can get that particular student, a job with your company.
Do you have a question?
I do. I asked a similar question with K-State when they were here earlier. And that is, it's great to see this type of project-based construction. Is the opportunity to do more projects being held because you don't have enough students or enough contractors to take them up, projects? How do we get more students trained and given the opportunity to do these kinds of hands-on?
I think my answer to that would be just continue to keep doing what we're doing, because that word will spread and our department's growing. We're on our way up here today, we were talking about, I have 26 students, 25 students in my construction building class this semester. That's too many. Like, I can't manage, that's a lot of students to manage when you're building. Next year, we're going to have to split that up. I'm going to have to go Monday, Wednesdays, Tuesday, Thursdays. We're going to have to go every afternoon. I'm going to have to split those students up to have that. I think if we keep creating that situation, it's just going to create its own little cosmos of going forward.
I think for Fort Hays to get students in those seats, our best avenue is that when I get Chris out into a Garden, Liberal, Dodge, Hoxie, Hays High, when I get them out so that students can start putting a name to a face, that helps us do a better job recruiting. But we're kind of in a catch-22 because every one of our faculty are teaching an overload right now, so they don't have time to go out and do the recruiting that we need to do to get those people. So at some point in time, we need another instructor. We need those people to get out and make contact with those high school instructors. And those are the best contact. When we have a high school instructor that knows what we do, and they can feed a kid that has that interest into these types of programs.
And we'll be back next year with students. This was our test. We were just coming to see what goes on here. We knew the second we walked in, we should have brought students. Why didn't we bring
We
students?
should have brought students. We should have been there earlier.
We should have came for 2 days. But we're learning too, so slowly taking this steps. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, we got some brochures. If you need a hard hat, please feel free to take a little hard hat with you. We've got some more out on the table, pens out on the table, anything you need. So business cards, if you want to get in touch with us.
Thank you very much, and thank you for taking up our